Hey, what's up guys? Another Plan Explain here today. Gonna be playing 200 Zoom as the 500 pool is kind of dead, so not much action. But I think we can make it work at the 200 Zoom stake. I don't have much of a sample in any of these players, so I'm just gonna be playing HUDless and trying to make the best decision that I can. Gonna try and keep things simple and not make any huge exploits, just because, like I said, I don't know these players, but I'm going to talk through all my decisions and, hopefully we can get some interesting hands. As always, if you have a question about a specific hand, feel free to leave a comment and I'll try and get back to you. And in terms of my labeling system, green or purple are going to be what I perceive as weaker players, and then blues are people I'm kind of uncertain about, and then orange are guys that I know are regs or pros. So 5's under the gun, not supposed to be a pure open, but when I have two weaker players at the table, I'm going to open always. And then the times that you do open, you're always meant to defend a 3-bet, I believe. So I will call and just check fold this flop. If I had 5s with a diamond, could be an interesting hand to use as a check raise on the flop, but with no diamond, just going to pitch it. These mono boards are meant to play very passively, so I'm just going to start with a check and go from there. I think on the turn ace, I'm just going to use a small bet. Those mono boards are just meant to be played quite passively in general by both players, so lots of checking on flops, and then I don't mind delay c-betting for a small size on a lot of turns. It's really difficult for him to defend enough, especially on the ace. Easy defend with king jack and easy open here. Against like less than 1/3, I think this is like pretty marginal. Might be slightly losing, but I am going to call. If it was 1/3, I would fold, but when he goes basically quarter pot, I think floating is going to be okay. And then river, you can use any sizings really. I'm in a block just repping a weak 10, a 9. You could even value bet. You can basically value bet any pair for this size, to be honest. I think a 10 should go bigger, to be honest. So yeah, and I think his call is fine against my sizing. Ace 9 suited in these positions, I'm going to fold, but it's definitely on the cusp. Yeah, I think considering folding his hand is a pretty big mistake. He obviously has to call always. When I go that small, I can be evaluating worse hands. So when I'm bluffing for 1/3 on the river, I'm basically just targeting his ace highs with my hand. So again, need to be a bit passive on these mono boards, so I'm going to check. The ace turn, I think this hand can probably do either or. I will check again, but I don't think betting is the worst when you can get value from some 9x and 7x and you still have the open ender as well. So here we squeeze and this weaker player calls. I'm going to call my 10 here, and that seems fine. I'm actually going to check and probably not fold against this player. I don't have any information about him. but I'm not going to get him to fold any better hands by betting, but I could get him to like, you know, start putting money in with like king 10 type of hands by checking. And when he goes this big, I'm actually just going to jam the flop and just deny him some equity with whatever random stuff he has. Maybe he even somehow bet folds a hand like, you know, pocket sixes or something. Or bet calls ace 10, yeah, so. Unfortunate run out, but happy with my play there. Typically a fold on the button, but with the weaker player, I'm going to be opening wider, so becomes quite an easy open. I think that hand just plays quite poorly multi-way, the ace 4. One thing I like to do, I think I mentioned it in previous Plain Explains, but in case I haven't, one thing I like to do against weaker players is like all these garbage hands that I would typically fold blind versus blind, I end up just limping them. Like this hand has some playability post flop, but probably still too weak to raise, and they just don't raise versus limp enough, so you get to realize your equity more often than you should, and then they also fold flop too much, so you get to just like take it down on the flop quite a bit. So I find that overperforms against weaker players, and I'm pretty imbalanced there, to be honest. Like I'm not going to do that with any strong hands, just assuming that the recreational players aren't going to, you know, start raising versus my limp too much or whatever. Like I just don't expect them to adjust. So here we need to, you know, take into consideration our opponent used a big flop size, so that's going to impact our later street decisions. He kind of off the hook here when he checks back turn, and now I think we have a clear value bet. In the last situation that was similar, I said I would value bet a 10 bigger, but because he took a bigger size on flop, he's a bit more polar, and therefore I need to be a bit. My value betting range on the river is a bit stronger than it would be in the other spot. So like I wouldn't be value betting like every pair here like I could potentially in the other spot. So I'm going to use the 1/3 instead of a big bet there. Had he gone 1/3 on flop, check turn, then I would use a large river size just because his range is much wider and he'll have a lot more, a lot of other like weak hands that he can consider calling with. Whereas in that spot, his range is just so polar that I need to be a bit more careful with my value betting threshold. So this board looks kind of worse than it is. Like we have all the sets, we have all the straights except, you know, queen 9 offsuit that he could potentially have. Although not everyone defends that, so anyway. We have all the 2 pairs and stuff. And all of our broadways have connected in some fashion, whether it's like having a pair or open end or a gutter, so good board for us, gonna do lots of small betting. Here, when it goes check in this limp pot, I'm actually just gonna start piling in money, and I don't think these guys really care what size you bet on the turn. They're either just gonna call or fold. And then if it was a brick, I would overbet on the 9 of hearts. I think just going normal size is fine. Just, you know, making sure he calls hands like this. just gonna call here. Like, it's pretty nice to squeeze super wide in this spot, but I think this hand is just gonna do better as a call. But I'd be interested in squeezing hands like King 6 suited, for instance. Ideally, just trying to get the weaker player heads up as often as possible. Same situation here. Usually fold, but gonna open a bit wider in this formation. Okay, I think this board is too connected for me to just small bet everything, so I'm gonna check back and go from there. When he checks twice, I think his range is just super weak now, and even though I have ace high, I think I can get some better ace highs to fold, deny him a little bit of equity, and then get even some weak pairs to fold by the river. So I'm gonna delay c-bet half pot. I don't think he has a queen ever. I think like he's kind of capped at a one pair hand that's like 8 or worse. I don't expect him to fold an 8, but I do expect him to fold hands like pocket 5s or 6-5 and stuff if I use this large size. So I'm going to do this. If he calls me with a queen, then, you know, good for him. But if he calls me with like anything, even some 8x, I might get the fold. That seems a little ambitious. But if he calls me with like, you know, 6-5 or 6-4 or like, you know, 7-4 type of stuff to my river overbet there, I think I kind of need to reevaluate my idea here. If he just has a queen that checked the turn, like this doesn't really give us any information whether or not our play was bad. Oops. Okay. This type of texture I like to use half pot. I think our hand just wants to bet almost always. And I'm gonna half pot the turn as well once I half pot flop. I will check this, but could consider raising for slim. And this hand's just gonna bet twice and give up on non-diamonds because our removal is so bad. Really, really bad. Really bad to bluff with 2 diamonds in your hand here because you block all the folds. So check and hope he checks back Jack 10 of diamonds. But nope. All right, that seems fine. In a limp pot, we have to remember ranges are super, super wide, so definitely not folding a board pair on the turn. And then river, we have like a fairly tricky decision. Just a lot of potential bluffs. All of the 8-9, Jack 9, Jack 8, kind of stuff like that. If he does, like, you know, King Jack, King 9, all these things. I don't block any of them, so I think I'm actually just going to call this one. And he has a queen, seems fine. I play 3-bet or fold pre-flop, so just folding pocket 6s in the cutoff there. So when we get an overcaller, especially when the 3-bet size is this small, I think I just want to call and realize my equity, play a hand with a weak player. Could consider 4-betting as well, but I think I'm just going to call when I'm getting such a good price. So if we were heads up, it would be an interesting, actually I would almost always check raise this type of hand on flop. When it's multi-way, you have to be a bit more careful because this player is probably not going to bet his whole range on this flop because he's into 2 people and he's kind of unsure what the weaker player is going to do. So it just becomes interesting, like your check raise might be less effective, and we can kind of see that because he check back flop. I think my hand really benefits from betting though, so I'm going to bet the turn. Sizing wise, I just want to represent like king queen plus, so I'm going to use a decently large size. Could even go pot if I wanted to, but I think, you know, if it was heads up and it went check check on flop, I would probably use pot or overbet on the turn because my range would be so polar. While my range is still polar because we're multi-way, I don't want to pile in just as much money because I have to kind of, you know, worry about 2 ranges instead of 1. So on the turn, I decided to use 75. pretty straightforward pre-flop decisions. Just gonna limp. Sorry, or just check behind here. Facing the limp. Flop, like in some of these limp pots, there's some merit to leading potentially, but I think check is fine here. Turn, hand's definitely good enough to value bet now, so I will do that. Pretty annoying spot getting raised here. I'm gonna call and then probably fold river if he bets big. And facing a pot size bet, I'm going to fold. Obviously a very good run out for us on the left. I think this hand just clearly wants to overbet. We unblock all of his calling hands by not having an ace or queen. And then when that's the case, you just want to use a large size when you have, you know, a strong hand. Whereas if I had, let's see. You know, if you slow played some 2-pair hand on the flop for whatever reason, like you could overbet this spot still, but I think it's a little less effective because you block some of the hands that your opponent can call with. Whereas when you unblock all the pairs, it's always better to use a big size. I'm going to be stabbing this turn a lot. This board is very, very good for us in the big blind. We'll have obviously lots of strong hands, lots of high equity hands, pair plus draws, etc. But I think when we have ace high, we can still check. We have enough showdown value. But like I would be bluffing this turn very aggressively with all sorts of stuff. I think just trying to show down here with ace 10. And we get pipped, that's okay. So again, my plan with these kind of garbage hands, if it folds to me, I'll just limp against this player until, you know, if he starts adjusting, then I'll stop. If he doesn't, I'll just, you know, do it every time. Probably don't need to do it with like 7 deuce off, like pure like 100% of your hands, but like any hand that's close to the cusp of being a raise but is a fold, against weaker players, I would definitely either raise yourself, you can still raise and probably be profitable, or limp, and you'll be doing better than folding. King 10 suited, it's going to mix 3-bet and call. Now that a player is overcalled, I kind of like 3-betting more, so I'm just going to squeeze. And easy fold. That was a big 3-bet from the imposition player, so against those sizings, I mean, my hand's a fold anyway, but you gotta be a lot tighter when, you know, I'm raising to 2.1 and they go 9 in position. probably don't even want much of a flatting range. Might have a few hands in there, but probably gonna mainly 4-bet or fold. On a board this good for us, I think just betting range is probably the easiest strategy. So turn is pretty good for us, obviously. We'll have all the ace queen, we'll have queen 9 suited still, we have all the sets, etc. But we do have to be careful in these positions. He'll still have, you know, ace queen offsuit, and he'll have queen 9 suited as well. So I want to use a big size, but I don't want to, you know, overbet too crazily because he can still have a lot of strong hands himself. So I'm going to use pot, basically. And I think our hand is like a very clear turn barrel. On the right, we turn straight. When the card is disconnected to the board, it's like pretty decent for the big blind in general. It's another spot where I don't really want to use too many overbets. So I'm just going to use, you know, 75%. And then we can polarize on the river. $10-7, easy defend. So against a small bet, we have a continue. Against a large bet, probably fold this hand just because we have reverse implied odds on a 10, and it's a very good board for our opponent. But against a small bet with a pair and some backdoors, easy call. There's that 10 we were talking about. So, you know, obviously it's nice to turn 2 pair, but if he starts piling tons of money in on this texture, we're going to be in a very, very difficult situation. Once it goes check on turn, he should almost never have a stronger hand than us. So I think our hand clearly is strong enough to overbet. We might occasionally lose to a hand like ace 3 or pocket 3s. Maybe he checks a hand like queen 10 on turn, but that seems kind of unlikely. So I think, you know, we clearly have the best hand majority of the time. Again, we unblock top pair and second pair, so a lot of his calling candidates. So just gonna use a large size here. If I had ace queen suited, I would always fold 4-bet. I think ace queen off here. It's definitely not pure, might be a mix, but I'm going to fold this time. So I like to check range on most textures out of position. And I think when I have top set, it's so hard for him to call that I'm down for flop check. Once it goes check, I'm gonna have a lot of hands that benefit from some protection betting and also just are strong enough to go for value. So I'm gonna use a small size. Can do this with any king, can do this with a lot of queens, can do this with obviously draws and whatnot. This river is horrendous, so I'm just going to check. If I had a set of 10s, like that would, you know, be a better value bet than pocket kings, because at least 10s, you know, unblocks some top pairs that could potentially hero call us, or some 2 pairs that could, you know, potentially hero call us. But when I have kings, it's a little bit more difficult. So he had the queen jack, but I think this texture is good enough where we can kind of get away with lots of small betting. You know, if your opponent's a very, very strong player, you probably want to do less of this and kind of pick your hands a little bit more appropriately. But I think when I'm playing a bunch of unknown players, I think this is just the simplest and most effective. People still overfold their their blinds, and also overfold to flop C bets and stuff. So Okay, pocket queens. It's meant to 4-bet sometimes and call quite a bit, but I find people end up jamming a bit too wide with pairs that should mainly call, so I like 4-betting queens a bit more. I still mix it, but I might be 4-betting a little bit more often than I normally would. Obviously, running into aces, not ideal. Pocket 10's been a 4-bet as well. Hopefully this one goes a bit better. Oh, chop chop. Nice. But yeah, like in that spot, he's probably mostly supposed to flat jacks and 10s to the 4-bet, but could be wrong on my read, but I feel like some people jam those a little bit too often, and then, you know, because it makes queens a bit of a better 4-bet because you dominate more of their jamming range. This hand, obviously, raise versus limp, and then facing limp raise. I'm just going to call this time. Could use this as a 4-bet candidate as well, I think, but I'm just going to call this time. Obviously not a great flop. He should probably bet super small, as he does. I think my hand still continues just because we have the best unpaired hand. We can improve to beat a lot of his value bets, i.e. any, you know, any under pair basically. So I will call. It's kind of interesting on the jack if he checks what we want to do. Gonna defend the 9-7 on the right. Not sure what to do here. I have a feeling I'm meant to call, so I'm going to, but it doesn't feel great. Betting so small, we can still improve to beat some of his value bets, i.e. he can be doing this with a jack. Obviously we can hit a 10, etc. It just doesn't feel great on a board pair because obviously if we river a king or a queen, you know, he can have ace king, ace queen, or he will have them at full frequency. Anyway, I still think we probably need to continue on turn, but super close. On the right, we defend pre, he bets small, we call. Turn, I could go thin for value and like bet some of my 7x. I think this time I'm gonna check, but you know, his range is super wide that I think it makes sense to bet some 7s at least. Once he checks turn and river, I think, you know, we have the best hand almost always, so I am gonna go for small value bet, especially because we have the 7 of hearts. On the left, gonna mix 4 bets and calls. This time I'm going to call. I went very large, but still going to call. Alright, on this flop, he's gonna bet small with most of his range, if not his entire range. I will call this hand, obviously, nut gutter, backdoor flush draw, etc. With a weaker player in the blinds, I'm gonna open this. Very interesting turn. On the right, gonna start with a small bet. So I have an interesting decision on the left. Like, my hand's strong enough to bet turn and bet river. It's pretty thin. Obviously, he'll have like king, queen, king, jack, all of his worst ace-x. I think I'm cool with it. I'm gonna bet fold to a jam because I don't think he's gonna have enough check jam. Like, I don't think he's gonna bluff the turn enough by like check jamming. But once he just check calls, I think like I basically win almost always. I lose to like king 10 suited. That's 2 combos. I don't really see why like many other hands would play it this way. You know, pocket aces, I guess. Whatever. Anyway, I'm gonna jam. It's a bit thin, but I think it's fine. Yeah. Always feels good to get snapped by a worse hand there. So again, on the right, just gonna start with a small bet. Queen 8. If I had a heart, I think I'd be interested in barreling. I think without, especially on a card that he's gonna connect with decently well, I'm gonna just slow down. Obviously, good river. Ace 4. I'm gonna mix calls and 3 bets. This time we'll 3 bet. If he went a bit smaller, I would always raise. When he goes slightly bigger, just gonna call. All right. So we're super deep against what I think is a weaker player. So I'm just gonna and I have the nuts. So I'm just gonna try and pile in as much money as he can. I'm basically saying to myself, I think this guy's a queen. How do I get as much money from his queen X as possible? I don't think he's gonna fold any queen X. And when he snap calls the turn, I'm just gonna obviously shove the river, and I'm gonna shove like fairly quickly. Just, hope he has top pair and pays me basically. Oh, he's definitely got something. Let's see if he feels curious. Call. Ah, all right. He made the discipline lay down this time. I still think I like what I did. Just range betting flop, on says a dry, disconnected texture, turn the nuts. We're super deep, so we want to pile in money. He's gonna have a queen very often. He's never gonna fold turn, so I like going very big. And then river, SPR is 1.5. I don't think it makes much sense to use any other size, but all in here. This is interesting. So, I might actually just fold here, to be honest. He's he's pretty shallow, so we don't have as good implied odds. He also used a fairly large size, especially for a stack size, so I'm just gonna fold. On the right, I raise versus limp. Fish don't really limp re-raise enough, so I like to raise quite aggressively against limps. And then they'll obviously also overfold the flop, so I think, just range betting a lot of these textures quite good. And then once he calls turn, we have nothing. Just gonna check and give up. If he checks the river, I might bet half pot just to try and fold him off some overcard combos that, might have floated flop. If he has king 9 or whatever and just doesn't bluff river, I don't really want to check back and lose that. So if he had checked, I would, bet something on the river, but as played, I'm obviously folding. I think this opens half the time. Gonna fold this time. And opening always when I have weaker player in the blinds. So we'll keep going for a few more minutes here, see if we can get one or two more interesting spots, and then call it. Also, I'd be curious to know what you guys think is the best length for these playing explains. I typically go around 40 minutes, sometimes a bit longer, sometimes a bit shorter. Curious what you guys think the best length is. Okay, pocket kings. Neither of us should have any straights. Neither of us really have queen 9 suited or 9-7 suited in this spot. I'll have pocket 10s, pocket jacks, and a sliver of pocket 8s. He'll have all of them. So, but obviously we still have the overpair advantage. Anyway, I'll have jack 10 suited. Neither of us should really have 10-8 suited. So I think I can just get away with betting. Turn is interesting. I don't block any 10x with my combo. If I had heart diamond, I would be in a much better spot here. So it's kind of just interesting what I want to do. Maybe when I block the 10x, I'll just keep barreling, and in this scenario, I'll check. But it's kind of dumb either way, because now if he has a 10, I'm just in some terrible bluff catching situation. So maybe I should just bet and get called by all of his jack x and pocket nines, 8-9 type stuff, because now this spot is obviously pretty toxic. Anyway, potential bluffs you can have, ace queen is the obvious one, king queen, I blocked that twice. Ace 9 if he has it. Any under pairs potentially that float flop. Okay, well, I'm just gonna lose almost always on this river, but I don't think there's anything we can do about it. He just like really runs out of bluffs now. King queen got there, ace queen got there. If he was bluffing with pocket sevens, like that got there. I'm gonna hand like 6-7, so just gonna end up folding the river. Guess he's worried about some boats, and I can have obviously all the jack X of clubs and stuff that plays this way. Probably still meant to jam, but especially when you block some of the boats. Again, opening a bit wider with a weaker small blind. Who decided to punish me this time. Okay, so my opponent leads on this flop. It's kind of interesting because he's not really supposed to have a huge advantage on this board. He shouldn't have deuces, threes, and fours very often because they're not meant to open pure. I guess when he does open them, like obviously he calls 3-bet. Even 6-5, he's not supposed to have full frequency. So just interesting choice to lead by him. My hand, it's just obviously an easy call. Probably this hand just calls down. It's probably better the bigger sizes he used because we block all the nutted hands, so if he decides to rep the nutted hands, it's obviously a lot harder for him to have them when we block ace 5 and pocket fours. But if he goes super thin like this, or sorry, uses small sizes and it goes thin, it's like pretty annoying because he's gonna end up having like 6s and 7s and 8s a lot. But anyway. Once he checks river, we're just gonna check back. And yeah, kind of what I predicted. But I don't think obviously there's anything we could do about that. I think with this player limping and a weak player behind, I'm just gonna complete this hand and see what happens. Okay, I guess I'm kind of like forced to play this hand. Not ideal when this guy like ends up raising. Easy fold now. Alright, I think we'll call it after this orbit. I'm gonna size down my 3-bet here because of stack depth. But yeah, I think we had some like fairly interesting hands. Like I said at the beginning, if you guys have any questions about any of them, let me know. When I have like these like super middle strength hands against weaker players, I like to just check them back and kind of use them as bluff catchers as opposed to like just pure betting here. You can still pure bet, I think it's fine, but I feel like I can make slightly better decisions against weaker players once I start with the check. It goes half pot, I call, and then we'll see what he sizes on the river. When he goes half pot, I'm never folding. Like, seen it too many times where it's just random bluffs here or just like, a worse king for whatever reason. So we're gonna lose a lot here, but we only have to be right, obviously 1 in 4 times when he bets half pot, so seems fine. As always, guys, for those of you who've been watching, the plan explains by me and some of the other coaches, you know the spiel by now, but there'll be a link in the description. We run a CFP together, so if you're interested in improving your poker game, check out our site. It shows you what we offer. We accept most students who are winning at 100 NL and above. If you're playing 50 NL and you're doing well, you should still submit an application. We'll review it and there's a good chance you get in as well. So thanks for watching. Like I said, if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. Check out the site if you're interested in coaching, and we'll see you in the next video.